Hi, this is Greg Kihlstrom. Welcome to the Agile World podcast, where we discuss customer experience, employee experience, and transformation in an agile age. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at theagile.world and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, a blueprint for creating an experience-led organization, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile World podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of customer experience in a membership organization. Also, since our guest is from the American Marketing Association, we're going to talk a little bit about the relationship between marketing and customer experience. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Severns, Chief Experience Officer at the American Marketing Association. First, why don't you tell me a little bit about what you do at AMA as their Chief Experience Officer?
Hi, Greg. So my team is the experience team, and we cover innovation. There's design and user experience, of course, web development for new products, and then marketing. The marketing teams on the experience team, we have live experience communities, data science and analytics. Our biggest goals as a team is we're in the process of redefining the AMA membership model, which is pretty much the association's business model. We are also tasked with, as marketing is part of the team, growing awareness, growing advocacy, and basically ensuring the customer experience across digital and physical, all digital and physical channels. Refining that. And
Yeah.
then in addition to that, as we go toward a new model, the data team, which is a fairly new team since I've gotten here, I built this team as part of future growth, is to really provide a learning structure for the organization to give us insights into whatever decisions we're making, providing that continuous customer feedback and basically insight into the customer. And then also the technical flexibility to achieve whatever goals we need to achieve.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot going on there. Redesigning the process and the experience. So yeah, well, let's dive into that then, and let's talk about customer experience and its importance in a membership association like AMA. So I'll start with what's your definition of great customer experience?
So number one, I think the most important thing about a great customer experience is that it's human. There's, the typical answers that I would think of is that, the experience anticipates my needs as a user. There's friction-free experience. But I think the most important part of that is that it's human and gives a sense of connection or a sense of belonging. Like even, that sounds all like bold, change the world, but I think even down to shallow products like something consumable like a candy bar or something that's functional like a pen, aligning those around some sort of core connection, where that connection might start around brand love, for example. Like I have this specific pen, that I use all the time. It's just a, cheapy disposable pen, but I love it.
Yeah,
I only like writing with this pen. But there's a connection, with that, even if it's a functional connection, and it's, something that is part of my life, even in a shallow way.
Yeah, I love that focus on the human connection. So what does that mean for an organization like AMA, and how is a membership organization different from other types of organizations when it comes to CX?
Well, one of the things that was interesting when I started here, so I started in early 2017, and I never worked for an association before, and I didn't realize both the benefits, the pros and cons of all the stakeholders. There's multiple layers of stakeholders. So yes, you have your customers or your members, But there's also a layer of community leaders. We call them the mighty 1,000 volunteers.
Yeah.
And those are kind of the cross between, sometimes they're a customer, sometimes they're an employee. So they really can be an extension of our employees. So while we have like 65-ish, I think, people at the support center, there's, those volunteers that we work with to really co-create, especially as we're working on a new model. And then we also co-create with the customer as well. But it's that layer of stakeholder management that becomes a major part of how we approach everything.
How do you measure that? What are the metrics? Because you're talking about something. When it comes to stakeholders, there are some things that are easier to measure with analytics and things like that than others. So, what's at the end of the day? How do you measure success?
And I think that's a really big. First of all, that's a big question, right? So.
Yeah.
That's where we have to start with, and that's one of the primary things that keeps me up at night and also gets me up in the morning, is thinking about exactly how are we measuring, how are we making sure that what we're paying attention to is what we should be paying attention to. At the moment, we have three primary goals as an organization. Audience growth being one of them. We also have customer lifetime value, and then engagement. And we dig into each of those in terms, and we're, different levels of sophistication with how we measure those. All three of those really being in a very beginning phase, I would say. We're digging into kind of, and if you dig into the engagement piece of that, which is kind of, what most people think about customer experience, we look at a trigger plus an interaction. So we think about things like it could be a data trigger or a monetary trigger, like I'm sharing my information with you or I'm paying for something. And then an interaction, which could be a behavior or some sort of sentiment. So we look at customer satisfaction, we're looking at net promoter score. We also, in the future, are looking at those supporting measurements like sharing or amplification, or how does that sharing disseminate outside of our current followers, or even likes on social, the kind of approval, in that sense.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing learning process for us, even to build up. We're currently have a small data science team, but that team is poised for growth as we get more sophisticated with our data.
How have shifts and preferences over time? I mean, I know all types of companies have gone through changes, but membership associations have had some unique challenges and shifts and dynamics over the years. How have these changes and preferences, and really how people want to interact with an organization like American Marketing Association, shifted how you approach customer experience?
So yeah, I think we're having the same problems most people are having right now. Like you have the Googles, the Amazons, the Apples, all the big tech companies are setting these huge expectations, really high expectations for the user. But when we don't have budgets like Amazon or Apple
Right.
or
Right.
Google, we have to get really scrappy with it. We have to, the AMA can take advantage of things like our face-to-face aspects of the experience. So we think about our, in-person meetings, and that's where some of our strengths can come in to support that. But it has been, a bit of a stumble through it as we work on upgrading our technology with limited budgets, and with some of the complications that come along with managing a team of volunteers, like this large team of volunteers and all these different chapters, and in addition to the typical transactions that you might see.
Yeah, I would imagine that volunteer framework adds layers of complication as well, because you're asking people to be ambassadors for your brand, and yet you're not compensating. Unlike a for-profit or something like that, you're not actually compensating them. So how are you able to extend the customer experience kind of through these volunteers, these local chapter, whether it's local chapter board members, stuff like that?
So we have committees. So we have like councils that help us manage that. We have, for example, in our professional community, we have about 70-ish chapters across the nation. And we have a team called the Professional Chapters Council that we work with regularly. We also, for example, we just sent out a big survey to get an idea as we're going into this chapter integration initiative and figuring out what chapters are using for technology, for example. So we're sending those out, and then the Professional Chapters Council members help us with that. We also have a meeting or regular meetings, I should say. We have regional retreats where we go individually. We make sure one of the chiefs is always present at one of those to answer questions and to kind of give a line into what the support center efforts are, and as well as, helping develop empathy for that group. And then we also have a leadership summit, which we invest in as an association, for all of the leaders to come together and sort of learn how to run a chapter, but then also have that back and forth. And then we have our collegiate community where we also have a collegiate council, similar kind of thing. It's a totally different world, different experience. And we also have our academic council for our academic community as well. And we have, regular annual meetings where we kind of can integrate and get in the weeds with what's going on in those communities. But we also have staff here that focuses, that where their primary focus is on academic, for example, or collegiate, for example. So we have people who specialize in that too.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the relationship between marketing and customer experience. So it's been said customer experience is the new marketing. It's certainly getting a lot of attention these days, but it's not exactly true, right? Because marketing is a separate practice. It's still vital and it's always going to be around. But what do you see as the relationship between customer experience and marketing? How do the two work together? And what do you see as, are they converging over time, or, how do you see that relationship?
I love this question, first of all, because it's something that we're talking about a lot and has a lot to do with the American Marketing Association in general, because we are redefining our model. And a huge part of that is that I believe there's a bit of an identity crisis right now with I don't know, I'd go so far as call it a crisis, but it's certainly like a big question mark out there in terms of marketing. For example, when I say that I work for the American Marketing Association, pretty much most people who don't work in marketing or don't work closely around marketing just correlate that with advertising. They'll say, "Oh, what'd you think of this, TV commercial or whatever?"
Right,
So they
right.
don't really know what it is, and they're still thinking of it, back in Don Draper days. And even marketers are having a tough time because the tasks that are actually marketing tasks are kind of dispersed throughout the organization. They can be in different groups, not always identified as marketing or seen as marketing. And then you can really also, in addition to that, if you're breaking down the competencies that make up marketing, you're really talking about business competencies. And we notice that whenever we're trying to figure out what are the jobs to be done for the people within the association, for people who would be uh, uh, taking advantage of the association. And it comes down to these are really business competencies. It touches all aspects of the business. Those worlds are kind of merging and then also dividing. So it's a really confusing time, but it's also makes it an exciting time. Early in my career, somebody once told me that where you see the chaos is also where the exciting things are happening because things are being born.
Yeah.
So I feel really lucky to be a part of having that chance to help define and even in a small way, lead it.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I like that. I like that insight about chaos and agree.
Yes.
um, so do you think, you kind of touched on this, but do you think that customer experience then is something that all marketers should at least understand? Or, what is I guess, what is the role in education? And it sounds like American Marketing Association is going through some evolution here as well. But is this something that at the very least everyone should understand, or are there, what do you see as the future there?
In short, I'd say yes.
Yeah.
I'm not a traditional marketer, though I do know a few of them. Happen to know a few. I'm not. I didn't come up through a traditional marketer world, so I feel like I have a good objective perspective on this as well. I think both marketing and customer experience are really about listening. And I see my job throughout my career has been designing for experiences, really, kind of understanding what that dirt, and when I say not designing experiences, but designing for experiences.
Mm,
So really understanding what is that dirt path and then designing along the way to help people. I'm a little bit biased because I'm a designer and I came up through, but I really do believe that both marketers and customer experience uh, practitioners really would benefit from adopting the design principles that you might see in technology fields like agile software development and a lot of science. Like that's something that's always fascinated me. So behavioral science, even data science. I think it really comes down to that feedback loop and ensuring that you're not standing on the mountaintop preaching the word to your customer
yeah.
and expecting they're going to follow you, but really getting down in the experience with them and observing like a scientist and also being quick about it, and getting messy and trying things out. And,
Yeah.
I hesitate to use the term fail fast because I think everybody rolls their eyes now when you say it. But I do think it's, everything's happening so fast that you have to get messy and you have to get in there and do it quickly,
Yeah.
experiment.
Totally agree. And I will say you get bonus points for bringing up the term agile on the Agile World podcast. So I
Yes.
appreciate that. Um, so let's talk a little bit about how CX is executed, and I'll start here with, what do you think is the greatest barrier to organizations providing great CX? It doesn't seem like anyone needs convincing that it's important, but what's standing in the way? If everybody kind of understands that it's important, what's standing in the way of great CX being delivered?
Yeah, I think the immediate answer that people have a tendency to give, or people that I've worked with have a tendency to give, especially executives who are new to thinking about design thinking and customer experience design, they'll say technology is a barrier. But I think really what I see behind that is the fear of the truth, the fear of uh, finally understanding what's really happening, and that might actually render your individual job or your employees' individual jobs as they see them as no longer valuable or even valid. And I think sometimes um, it's easier to get the truth than we want to believe.
Yeah.
And we kind of use technology as a scapegoat. So I think it's really the barrier is we have to have the courage to face what the truth is and to make those difficult decisions to do something about what the truth is. I see that time and time again. It's just this fear of like, oh, well, if I find out that they don't like this, then all that work that we just did for the past 10 years is for naught. And, you know, some machine can do it easy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, in a way, better data should give us those answers. But I agree. You put time and effort into something, and then find out it was a faulty premise or something like that, and then then all of a sudden, what is the truth? Is it what you're seeing, or is it what you've been putting time into? That's a difficult conflict there.
Yes.
Yeah. How would you characterize the role of employee experience in creating great customer experience? The idea of happy employees make happy customers and things like that.
I think one of, kind of what I was saying before about the AMA has these layers of stakeholders. It's really um, one of the most fascinating and important growth areas that I've seen personally working for the AMA. Employees are really an integral part of the brand experience, if you will, wherever you are. Right? They're often the front lines. They are talking to the customer. Um, I saw an article recently about customer experience regarding airlines. They were talking about the best and worst airlines rating. I don't know if you've seen that recently.
Yeah.
I won't name names for the airline because I would want to do that to the poor souls that are working on it. But I will say the one that got the high marks. This person, it was just a blog. It was just they were just blogging about it in reaction to some survey that came out. And this person took a flight, and one leg they had the worst, and one leg they had the best. And when they came out of it, it was really the face-to-face interactions that made all the difference. He said, the fact that the plane was a little bit kind of shabby, maybe a little rough around the edges,
Right.
could overlook many things if you have a person that an employee that works there that is being kind to you, is you know seeing you,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
really understanding your problem. There's a lot, it can go so far. I'm sure you've experienced that personally, where everything's just going wrong and an employee is just like, wow, I really understand how frustrating this is, and genuinely seems to understand it, even if they can't do anything about it. And it makes it better. It makes it like, okay, this is actually a good brand that sees me. So I think when you have employees that really get what you're doing and see their value of what they're offering to the business, I think that comes through to customers.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that brings it back to the human angle that you were talking about at the beginning of the show. So that's great. So one last question before we wrap up. As you mentioned earlier, in your career, you've played a few different types of roles. What do you think prepared you to be a chief experience officer, and what advice would you give to those that are looking, maybe following a similar career path of not necessarily a straight line to CXO, but that are looking to find a similar role in their future?
Sure. Um, so I think what prepared me would really be a passion for, I've always had a passion for, for my career. And at the core of it was about, the human experience. I'm, always fascinated by designing things that make people feel, or that can elicit some sort of feeling. Because at the end of the day, and this might be sound a little deep, but life is about experiences. It's not how much money you make or who likes you, or really even how you spend your time. It's about how you experience that time on the planet, right?
Yeah.
And your own perspective is really driving your own quality of life. And again, like I said before, the fact that I get to be a part of co-creating that, um, those experiences, really helping design what affects people's life experiences, that is the stuff that prepares me. Because at the end of the day, it feels like I'm doing something that matters. As far as like what I think, how people should prepare for a role like this or a similar role in the future, I think really looking at, first starting with passion. Like, you have to be excited about it, right, to get you through the frustrating times and the fear, because there's a lot of fear that surrounds this job, any job that's especially associated and so closely with technology and data.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fear that's surrounding, including your own internal fear. I'd study, human behavior, really thinking about things like psychology, behavioral science, even anthropology, um, And then also the things that surround that, and keeping up to date on data science and research, things that really point to the truth and the reality of what's going on, and being honest with yourself and surrounding yourself with, like, trying to be honest with the truth of what's going on.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Well, Jennifer, again, thanks for joining the show. And for those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you're doing?
You can, I guess the best way would be through LinkedIn, but also you can check out what we're doing at the AMA, going through massive changes. So it's different every quarter. We, have some great new advances. So if you're, in the US, I think, looking up your local chapter. And if you're not, just, hop online and see what's going on with us.
Great. Well, again, I'd like to thank Jennifer Severns, Chief Experience Officer at American Marketing Association, for joining the show. To learn more about both customer and employee experience, I recommend you go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and make sure to check out my latest book, The Center of Experience. More information is available on my website or wherever the book is available, like Amazon. Thanks for listening to The Agile World with Greg Kihlstrom. See you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile World podcast, brought to you by TEKsystems. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. You can learn more and get a copy of my latest book, The Center of Experience, from my website at theagile.world or on Amazon or other retailers. Until next week, stay agile.